I'm Stanwick Peterson, 58, a retired Army intelligence officer, living quietly in suburban Phoenix. Last Sunday, my son Marcus looked me dead in the eye during our family barbecue and said, "Dad, you're just a broken soldier who can't let go of the past." His words cut deeper than any enemy fire I'd faced overseas. The whole family laughed. His wife Sarah, my daughter-in-law of 3 years, even smiled that sympathetic smile I'd grown to hate. But Marcus had no idea that Sarah wasn't who she claimed to be. For 27 years, she'd been my most trusted informant, embedded so deep that even I sometimes forgot the truth. As I watched her pour lemonade and play the perfect wife, I realized the time had come to remind my son and everyone else that this broken soldier still had a few classified secrets left to share. Sometimes the most devastating battles are fought at kitchen tables, not battlefields. Asterisk. The Purple Heart sits in a small wooden box on my dresser, gathering dust like everything else from my military years. Marcus used to hold it with reverence when he was 8, asking me to tell him again about the day I earned it. Back then, I was his hero. He'd wear my old combat boots around the house, stomping through the kitchen while his mother laughed and told him to be careful. Those days feel like they belonged to someone else entirely. Now Marcus sees that medal as a relic, a symbol of everything he believes I can't move past. He graduated summa cum laude from Harvard Law, landed a position at one of Phoenix's most prestigious firms, and bought a house in Scottsdale that costs more than I made in my entire military career. In his world, success is measured in billable hours and client acquisitions, not in lives saved or missions completed. The shift happened gradually. After my last deployment in Afghanistan, I came home different, quieter, more watchful, carrying invisible wounds that my family couldn't understand. While other fathers coached Little League and attended PTA meetings, I was learning to sleep without checking the perimeter first, teaching myself to relax in crowded spaces, fighting battles that no one could see. Marcus grew frustrated with my silences, my sudden startled responses, my need to sit facing the door in restaurants. What he saw as weakness, I knew as survival instincts that had kept me alive through 7 deployments across 3 different theaters. But try explaining that to a teenager who just wants his dad to be normal. The barbecue yesterday wasn't the first time he'd expressed his disappointment in me. It was just the first time he'd done it so publicly, so cruelly. When he called me a broken soldier, the rest of the family, my daughter Lisa, my brother Tom, even his wife Sarah, just nodded along like he'd stated an obvious truth. But Sarah's reaction bothered me most. That knowing smile, like she understood something the rest of them didn't. Because she did understand. She knew exactly who I was and what I'd accomplished. She'd been there for some of it. As I watched her serve potato salad and make small talk about her charity work, I felt the familiar weight of keeping secrets that mattered. For 27 years, I'd protected her identity, her mission, her life. I'd watched her build this perfect civilian existence, while knowing the classified truth of who she really was. Maybe it was time my son learned what a broken soldier was actually capable of. Sarah Elizabeth Morrison, that's the name on her marriage license, her driver's license, her passport. She'd been Sarah Morrison for so long that sometimes I wondered if she remembered her original name. The wedding invitation 3 years ago had been elegant, cream-colored paper with gold embossing, announcing the union of Marcus Peterson and Sarah Morrison. I'd walked her down the aisle because she claimed her father had died when she was young. In a way, that wasn't entirely a lie. Watching her navigate our family gatherings has been like observing a masterclass in human psychology. She remembers everyone's birthdays, brings thoughtful gifts, volunteers at the animal shelter, and runs a small non-profit that provides educational supplies to underprivileged children. She's the daughter-in-law every parent dreams of, accomplished, devoted to my son. The community adores her. She's been featured twice in the local newspaper for her charity work. Once for organizing a successful fundraiser that built a new playground at the elementary school. Her book club friends call her wise and insightful. The neighbors consider her the perfect addition to their upscale subdivision. Marcus talks about her constantly, her intelligence, her compassion, her ability to make their house feel like a real home. He lights up when he describes her work with disadvantaged children, how she spends weekends tutoring kids who can't afford private help. He's prouder of her achievements than his own, which says something about the man I raised. Even if he can't see past his own prejudices about his father. But I know things about Sarah that would shatter that perfect image. I know she speaks for languages fluently, and can blend into crowds in ways that would make a ghost envious. I know she can kill a man with her bare hands, and has done so twice in service to her country. I know she once spent 3 months in a Taliban prison, and never broke, never gave up the location of American forces, never revealed the identities of her contacts. I know she saved the lives of 12 soldiers in Kandahar by providing intelligence about an imminent attack. I know she helped expose a weapons smuggling operation that was funding terrorist activities across 3 countries. I know she sacrificed her own identity, her own family, her own future, to serve a country that wasn't even originally hers. And I know she genuinely loves my son. That's perhaps the most complicated part of this entire situation. What started as a strategic positioning, getting close to the family of her former handler as part of her deep cover transition, evolved into something real. I've watched her with Marcus, seen the way her eyes soften when he tells her about his day, noticed how she holds her breath when he's running late from work. The woman who once provided intelligence that helped prevent a chemical weapons attack now worries about whether Marcus is eating enough vegetables. The operative who survived interrogation now loses sleep. When her husband has a difficult case at work, she's built a life so authentic that sometimes I think she's forgotten it started as an assignment. But I remember. And yesterday, watching her smile sympathetically while my son called me broken, I decided it was time to remind everyone, including her, who we really are. The encrypted communication device was barely larger than a cigarette pack, but it connected me to assets across 3 continents. In 1997, I was a captain in Army intelligence, working in the chaos that was post-war Bosnia. The ethnic cleansing had officially ended, but the hatred remained, simmering beneath the surface of forced peace agreements. That's where I first met the woman who would eventually become my daughter-in-law. She was 19 then, a refugee from a small village outside Srebrenica that no longer existed. Her name was Selma Kadik, and she'd lost everything: parents, siblings, home, language, identity. She'd been living in a displacement camp near Tuzla for 2 years, teaching herself English from discarded American magazines, and learning to survive in a world that had forgotten her people existed. What made her valuable wasn't just her intelligence, though she was brilliant. What made her irreplaceable was her ability to become invisible, to slip between worlds and identities like water finding its way through stone. She could be a Serbian nationalist arguing for Greater Serbia one day, and a Croatian separatist demanding independence the next. People trusted her because she understood their pain. I recruited her during a routine intelligence gathering operation. We'd received reports of weapons caches being moved through the region, and I needed someone who could get close to the local arms dealers without raising suspicion. Most of our interpreters were men, too visible, too threatening. I needed someone who could hide in plain sight. Selma volunteered before I'd even finished explaining the risk. "You want to know who's moving guns?" she asked in heavily accented English. "I tell you exactly who, when, where. But I want something." She didn't want money or better housing or even a visa to America. She wanted to matter again. She wanted her life to count for something beyond mere survival. Our first mission together was supposed to last 3 days. It stretched into 3 weeks as we uncovered a smuggling network that reached from Bosnia through Croatia and into Western Europe. Selma didn't just provide information, she analyzed patterns, predicted movements, suggested strategies that saved lives, and prevented weapons from reaching terrorist groups. By the end of that first assignment, I knew I'd found something rare, a natural intelligence operative with a motivation to make it personal. Over the next 6 years, we worked together across the Balkans, then Afghanistan, then Iraq. She learned to fight, to interrogate, to disappear and reappear wherever American interests needed eyes and ears. She became fluent in Arabic and Pashto, studied international relations through correspondence courses, transformed herself from a displaced teenager into one of the most effective assets in the intelligence community. The brass took notice. So did one somewhere between the successful mission in Kabul, where she infiltrated a Taliban planning cell, and the operation in Baghdad, where she helped us prevent an attack on the Green Zone. I stopped seeing her as just an asset. She became family, the daughter I'd never had, the soldier I'd always respected, the friend I trusted with my life. When budget cuts and policy changes started forcing deep cover operatives into civilian life, I knew Selma would struggle with the transition. She'd never known peace, never experienced normal life, never had the chance to be anything other than a survivor and a spy. That's when I made the decision that would eventually bring her into my actual family. I helped her build a new identity, funded her education, provided the references and documentation she'd need to start over as Sarah Morrison. It was meant to be her reward for years of faithful service, a chance to live the American dream. She'd helped protect. I never imagined she'd end up married to my son, and I certainly never imagined that my son would one day dismiss both of us as irrelevant relics of a past he'd rather forget. The false identity documents were works of art. Social security number, birth certificate, school records, medical history. Sarah Elizabeth Morrison emerged fully formed from the bureaucratic machinery of American identification systems in 2003. A carefully constructed persona designed to withstand the deepest background checks. Creating a new identity isn't just about paperwork. It's about building a believable life story, complete with childhood memories, family connections, and the kind of mundane details that make a person real. Sarah needed to be able to discuss her hometown of Portland, Oregon, with confidence, even though she'd never lived there. She needed to know the names of her high school teachers, her first pet, her favorite childhood restaurant. We spent months crafting her backstory. Parents killed in a car accident when she was 17, tragic enough to explain why she had no family connections, but not so unusual as to raise suspicions. Academic scholarships to Arizona State University, where she studied international relations and humanitarian work. A quiet, studious young woman who preferred books to parties, volunteering to socializing. The beauty of Sarah's cover was its ordinariness. She wasn't trying to be remarkable or memorable. She was building the kind of quiet, productive life that forms the backbone of American communities. The sort of person neighbors wave to, but don't really know. Whose good deeds speak louder than her words. Her transition from Selma Caddick, battle-hardened, intelligence operative, to Sarah Morrison, earnest nonprofit worker, required more than new documents. It demanded a complete psychological transformation. She had to learn to sleep without checking exits, to trust strangers, to believe in happy endings. She had to discover who she might have been if war hadn't consumed her childhood. I watched this metamorphosis from a distance, providing guidance when she needed it, but letting her find her own path. She enrolled in graduate school, studying nonprofit management and child psychology. She volunteered at local organizations, slowly building the kind of community connections that would cement her new identity. The strategic patience required for deep cover work is something most people never understand. Sarah couldn't just appear in Phoenix and immediately start living a normal life. She had to earn her place in the community gradually, authentically. Every friendship, every professional relationship, every casual interaction had to be genuine enough to withstand scrutiny. She worked part-time, jobs, while finishing her degree tutoring at the community college, helping at a local food bank, teaching English as a second language to recent immigrants. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. The woman who'd spent years protecting America from its enemies was now helping other foreign-born residents find their place in American society. But Sarah threw herself into civilian life with the same dedication she'd once applied to intelligence work. She studied American culture like she'd once studied terrorist organizations, learning the subtle social codes that would help her blend in. She watched sitcoms to understand humor, followed sports to make small talk, joined book clubs to form friendships. My role during this period was complex. Officially, I was no longer her handler. Sarah Morrison had no connection to Army intelligence. Unofficially, I remained her lifeline to the world she'd left behind. The one person who knew her complete story and could provide guidance when her two identities felt irreconcilable. We met quarterly, always in different locations, always maintaining operational security, even though she was technically retired. These weren't official debriefings. They were conversations between friends, updates on her progress, discussions about the challenges of living a double life. She struggled initially with the quietness of civilian existence. After years of heist operations where every decision could mean life or death, the mundane choices of daily life felt almost paralyzing. Which apartment to rent, which job to take, which charitable cause to support. These decisions carried no immediate consequences, but they would define her new identity. I guided her through these choices, helping her understand that building a cover identity was itself a form of mission accomplishment. Every genuine friendship she formed, every professional success she achieved, every community connection she established made Sarah Morrison more real, and Selma Caddick more distant. By 2007, the transformation was complete. Sarah had established herself as a respected member of the Phoenix nonprofit community. Her organization was providing educational support to hundreds of children. She'd been featured in local media, served on charitable boards, earned the trust and admiration of people who had no idea they were working alongside one of America's most effective former intelligence operatives. That's when she met Marcus at a charity fundraiser where his law firm was a sponsor. I'd been watching from the sidelines as she built her new life, proud of her success, but never imagining our worlds would collide so personally. When she called to tell me she'd met someone special, someone who made her laugh and challenged her, thinking I was genuinely happy for her, I just never expected that someone to be my own son. Marcus's law school graduation photo sits on my mantle, a proud moment captured in time. He's wearing his cap and gown, diploma in hand, grinning with the confidence of someone who's conquered every challenge life has thrown at him. Sarah appears in the background of that photo, barely visible among the crowd of families celebrating their graduates. She'd positioned herself there deliberately, of course. By 2009, Sarah had been monitoring my family from a distance for 2 years, part of her gradual integration into Phoenix's social circles. When she learned that Marcus Peterson, Harvard law graduate and rising star at Morrison & Associates, was the son of her former handler, it became a strategic opportunity. What I didn't anticipate was how quickly strategy would evolve into something genuine. Their first conversation happened at a charity auction where Marcus's firm was sponsoring a table. Sarah was there representing her nonprofit, trying to secure funding for a new literacy program. She'd done her homework. She knew about his pro bono work with immigration cases, his reputation for thorough preparation, his weakness for intelligent women who challenged his assumptions. But when she called me the next week, breathless with excitement about meeting this amazing lawyer who actually listens, I heard something in her voice I'd never heard before. For the first time since I'd known her, Selma Cadexer Morrison sounded like a woman in love. Marcus was equally smitten. He started mentioning this incredible woman during our increasingly rare phone conversations. Sarah Morrison, who ran a nonprofit that was actually making a difference. Sarah, who spoke 3 languages and had traveled extensively. Sarah, who understood suffering in ways that made her compassionate without being naive. He had no idea how accurate that last observation was. Watching their relationship develop was like observing a carefully choreographed dance, where only one partner knew the steps. Sarah navigated every milestone with perfect precision, expressing just enough interest to encourage him without seeming eager, sharing carefully curated stories about her past that created intimacy without revealing truth, building the kind of emotional connection that would make Marcus want to protect and cherish her. But somewhere in that careful performance, something real emerged. Sarah began calling me, not for operational guidance, but for relationship advice. She worried about deceiving someone she was growing to love. She struggled with the ethics of building a marriage on a foundation of lies, even if those lies served a greater good. He makes me want to be the person he thinks I am, she told me. During one of our quarterly meetings, not Sarah Morrison, the cover identity, but Sarah Morrison, the woman who deserves to be loved. The wedding was the most difficult day of my professional life. Standing at the altar, watching Sarah walk down the aisle in her grandmother's dresser, detail she'd invented, but somehow made feel true, I felt the weight of every secret I was keeping. Marcus looked at her like she was a miracle, and in many ways, she was. Not the miracle he imagined, but something far more complex and remarkable. When the minister asked who was giving this woman to be married, I said I do, with a voice that almost broke. Because in a very real sense, I was giving away someone who mattered to me deeply to someone who would never truly know who she was. The reception was perfect. Of course, Sarah had planned every detail with the same attention to operational security she'd once applied to intelligence missions. The guest list was carefully curated to avoid anyone who might recognize her from her previous life. The venue was chosen for its multiple exit points. Even her maid of honor was someone she'd met through her nonprofit work. Genuine friendship built on her cover identity. But watching her dance with Marcus, seeing the way she melted into his arms like she'd found her home, I knew that whatever strategic considerations had brought them together, what existed between them now was absolutely real. The ethical implications kept me awake at night. My son was building his life with a woman whose true history included classified operations, whose real name was different from the one on their marriage certificate, whose ability to love him was genuine but whose past remained a carefully guarded secret. Yet I also knew that Sarah had earned the right to choose her own future. She'd served her country with distinction, sacrificed her youth and her identity for operations that saved lives. If she could find happiness and love with my son, who was I to interfere with that possibility? The pregnancy announcement 2 years later seemed to resolve some of my ethical concerns. Sarah's joy was uncontainable. The former intelligence operative, who'd learned to trust no one, was now planning to bring a child into the world. Marcus's excitement about becoming a father transformed him into an even better version of himself, but the miscarriage that followed 3 months later nearly broke them both. I watched Sarah retreat into herself, the professional compartmentalization that had kept her alive during dangerous missions, now protecting her from emotional devastation. Marcus struggled to understand her grief, to reach past the walls she'd unconsciously erected. That's when I realized how completely Sarah had integrated her two identities. Her sorrow wasn't just Sarah Morrison mourning the loss of her first pregnant head, was Selma Caddick, grieving for the family she'd never thought she'd be allowed to have. The woman who'd lost everything as a teenager was now losing the chance to create something new and precious. Helping them through that crisis required more delicate maneuvering than any intelligence operation I'd ever managed. I couldn't reveal why I understood Sarah's pain so completely. Couldn't explain why I knew exactly how to support them both through their grief. I had to watch my son struggle to comfort his wife, while knowing that I possessed insights that might help. Insights I could never share, but they survived it, grew stronger together, and eventually found their way back to hope and happiness. The charity work that had brought them together became their shared mission. Sarah threw herself into programs supporting children, while Marcus took on more pro bono cases involving family law. Watching them rebuild their relationship was like witnessing Sarah complete her transformation from operative to civilian. She learned to trust Marcus with her emotions, to rely on his strength, to believe in their future together. The strategic positioning that had brought them together evolved into a partnership built on mutual respect, shared values, and genuine love, which made yesterday's humiliation even more devastating. My son, the man who'd benefited from Sarah's love and support, who'd never questioned his good fortune in finding such an remarkable partner, dismissed his father as a broken soldier, while his wife, my former asset, my friend, my responsibility, smiled sympathetically and said nothing. My combat journal sits in the bottom drawer of my desk, pages filled with observations that never made it into official reports. The entries from Afghanistan are particularly difficult to read, not because of what they describe about the enemy, but because of what they reveal about me. Day 127. Peterson still jumping at vehicle backfires. Needs to get his head right before someone gets hurt. I wrote that about myself in third person, as if creating distance would make the problem more manageable. It didn't work then, and it's not working now. The psychological wounds from 7 deployments don't heal on a schedule convenient to family expectations. Marcus wanted his father to return from war unchanged, ready to resume the role of suburban dad who coached basketball and helped with homework. What he got instead was a man who checked locks 3 times before bed, who couldn't sit in restaurants without positioning himself to watch all entrances, who sometimes woke up reaching for weapons that weren't there. The Veterans Administration calls it post-traumatic stress disorder, but that clinical terminology fails to capture the daily reality of living with a nervous system that won't stand down from high alert. Simple activities become complex negotiations with invisible threats. Crowded spaces trigger unexpected sounds, activate fight or flight responses that served me well in combat zones, but make me seem unstable at suburban barbecues. Marcus's growing embarrassment became obvious during his high school years. Friends' fathers were successful businessmen who talked about stock portfolios and golf handicaps. His father was a career soldier who startled when the garbage disposal turned on, who insisted on sitting with his back to the wall, who sometimes disappeared into himself during conversations when memories intruded without invitation. The disconnect between his expectations and my reality created a gulf that widened with each passing year. He excelled academically, socially, professionally, everything I'd hoped for him. But his success seemed to require increasing distance from the father, whose struggles embarrassed him. College provided a convenient excuse for physical separation. Harvard Law School offered even greater distance. By the time he'd established his career in Phoenix, our relationship had devolved into polite but infrequent contact. He'd call on holidays, visit occasionally, include me in major family events, but always with the careful courtesy reserved for distant relatives rather than the easy intimacy of father and son. Sarah's arrival in his life actually improved our dynamic initially. She encouraged Marcus to spend more time with me, organized family gatherings, facilitated conversations that might not have happened otherwise. She understood trauma in ways that Marcus never could, though he didn't know why. Her empathy felt so genuine and informed. But yesterday's barbecue revealed how fragile that improvement had been. When Marcus's frustration with my inability to move on finally erupted into public humiliation, the rest of the family's reaction told me everything I needed to know about their true feelings. My daughter Lisa nodded along with her brother's assessment. My brother Tom looked uncomfortable, but said nothing in my defense. Even Sarah, who knew better than anyone what I'd sacrificed and accomplished, offered only a sympathetic smile that suggested she agreed with Marcus's characterization. "You're just a broken soldier who can't let go of the past." The words hit like shrapnel, finding every vulnerable spot in my psyche. Not because they were entirely untrue, but because they reduced 27 years of military service, 7 combat deployments, and countless classified operations to a simple character flaw that embarrassed my successful son. Marcus sees only the damaged veteran who struggles with civilian life. He doesn't know about the Taliban ammunition depot we destroyed based on intelligence I'd gathered, saving an entire Afghan village from being overrun. He doesn't know about the terrorist financing network we dismantled, preventing attacks on American soil. He doesn't know about the weapons smuggling operation we stopped, keeping military-grade explosives out of the hands of extremist groups. He certainly doesn't know that his wife was instrumental in many of those successes. The journal entries from my final deployment reveal a man pushing himself beyond reasonable limits, taking risks that worried his commanding officers, volunteering for missions that others considered too dangerous. I was trying to find meaning in the violence, purpose in the chaos, something that would justify the cost of what this life was doing to my family relationships. Day 203. Peterson requesting transfer to forward operating base. Says he needs to feel useful again. Recommend approval. He's no good to anyone sitting behind a desk. I was no good sitting behind a desk then, and apparently I'm no good sitting around suburban Phoenix now. At least according to my son, who's built his comfortable life on foundations he doesn't understand. Protected by sacrifices he's never acknowledged, married to a woman whose true identity would shatter his worldview. The breaking point wasn't just Marcus's cruel assessment of my psychological state. It was the realization that everyone I'd protected, everyone I'd served, everyone whose safety I'd prioritized over my own well-being, saw me as nothing more than a damaged relic of conflicts they'd prefer to forget. Sarah's sympathetic smile was the final insult. She knew exactly who I was, what I'd accomplished, what I'd sacrificed. If anyone should have defended me, should have challenged Marcus's dismissive characterization, it should have been her. But she said nothing. She smiled that perfect, understanding smile, and let my son's words hang in the air, like an accepted truth. That's when I decided that keeping secrets was no longer serving anyone's interests. Not mine, not Sarah's, and certainly not Marcus's. It was time for my family to learn what a broken soldier was really capable of, and for my son to discover that his perfect wife was far more complicated than he imagined. Sarah's Charity Foundation certificate hangs in their home office, a testament to her dedication to improving educational opportunities for underserved children. The Phoenix Community Foundation recognized her work last year, praising her innovative approach to literacy programs and her ability to build partnerships between schools and local businesses. Watching her accept that award, seeing her genuine emotion as she spoke about children who reminded her of herself, I felt the familiar cognitive dissonance of knowing someone's complete story while observing them live only part of it. Sarah Morrison, nonprofit executive, is passionate about education because she understands how knowledge can transform lives. But Selma Caddick, former intelligence operative, knows that information is power in ways that extend far beyond classroom learning. When she talks about helping disadvantaged children access opportunities, she's speaking from experience about what it means to be invisible, overlooked, forgotten by systems that should provide protection and support. The seamless integration of her true motivations with her cover identity is what makes Sarah so effective in civilian life. She's not pretending to care about children's welfare, she genuinely does, for reasons that are both personal and strategic. Her commitment to the work is authentic, even if the backstory that drives it remains classified. I've watched her navigate neighborhood dinner parties where she discusses fundraising strategies with the same analytical precision she once applied to intelligence gathering. She maps social networks, identifies key influencers, develops approaches tailored to each potential donor's specific interests and motivations. The tactics are identical to those she used in espionage work, but the objectives now focus on building playgrounds rather than preventing terrorist attacks. Her book club friends consider her insightful because she approaches literature with the same careful attention to subtext and hidden meaning that once helped her decode enemy communications. When they discuss novels about war or displacement, her observations carry a weight that the other members attribute to extensive reading rather than lived experience. The neighbors in their upscale Scottsdale subdivision see her as the ideal community member, someone who organizes block parties, remembers anniversaries, offers to water plants when people travel. They don't know that her situational awareness extends to monitoring everyone's routines, noting changes in behavior patterns, maintaining the kind of environmental vigilance that intelligence operatives never completely abandon. Marcus delights in introducing her at professional functions, proud of her accomplishments and impressed by her ability to engage meaningfully with anyone from corporate executives to community activists. He attributes her social skills to natural charisma rather than years of training in human intelligence gathering and relationship manipulation. But I see the operational discipline beneath the domestic routine. The way she positions herself at social gatherings to observe all participants while appearing casually engaged in conversation. The systematic approach she takes to building relationships, gathering information about people's backgrounds, interests, and connections before developing strategies for deeper engagement. Even her charity work follows intelligence principles. She's built a network of contacts throughout Phoenix's nonprofit sector, maintained relationships with former colleagues from various organizations, and positioned herself as a valuable resource for anyone working on education-related initiatives. Her influence extends far beyond her official title, because she understands how to leverage relationships for maximum impact. The most remarkable aspect of Sarah's performance is how completely she's internalized the emotional components of her cover identity. When she tears up during conversations about struggling students, when she stays late to tutor a child who's falling behind, when she spends weekends writing grant proposals for programs that may never receive funding, her responses are absolutely genuine. She's found a way to channel the protective instincts that made her an effective operative into civilian work that serves similar purposes through different means. Instead of preventing attacks on American soldiers, she's preventing educational failures that could limit children's futures. Instead of gathering intelligence to protect national security, she's gathering resources to protect vulnerable young people from systemic disadvantages. The transformation is so complete that I sometimes wonder if she remembers the woman who once spent 3 days in enemy territory gathering intelligence on weapon shipments, surviving on rainwater and emergency rations while maintaining radio silence to avoid detection. The woman who now frets about whether Marcus is eating enough vegetables once walked 70 miles through hostile territory to reach an extraction point. But occasionally, I catch glimpses of her operational training. The way she automatically notes exit routes when entering new buildings. The systematic approach she takes to home security, disguised as general safety consciousness. The reflexive caution she exercises around new acquaintances, evaluating potential threats while appearing to make friendly small talk. These glimpses remind me that Sarah Morrison may be genuine, but she's also constructed the woman my son fell in love with, Israel. But she's built on foundations that include classified experiences, trained responses, and survival skills that civilian life will never require. The ethical complexity of this situation weighs on me constantly. Marcus has the right to know who he married, but Sarah has the right to choose how much of her past to reveal. Their marriage is built on love and mutual respect, but also on secrets that could destroy everything they've created together. Yesterday's barbecue crystallized my frustration with this impossible balance. Watching Sarah smile sympathetically, while my son dismissed me as a broken soldier, felt like the ultimate betrayal of our professional relationship and personal friendship. She knows better than anyone what I've accomplished, what I've sacrificed, what I've contributed to missions that matter. Her silence felt like collaboration with his ignorance, a choice to prioritize her cover identity over the truth of our shared history. In that moment, I realized that protecting her secret was no longer protecting her. It was enabling my son's disrespect and allowing my own contributions to be diminished and dismissed. The time had come to remind everyone involved that some secrets serve no one's interests when their protection requires accepting unacceptable disrespect. The classified mission file sits in my secure storage unit, a compilation of operations reports that document Sarah's intelligence work over 6 years of active service. Reading through those documents after yesterday's humiliation, I'm reminded of exactly who my son married and what his dismissive attitude toward his father really means. Operation Desert Storm 2. Asset provided critical intelligence on weapons cache locations, resulting in successful interdiction of arms shipments to insurgent groups. Assets, cultural knowledge and language skills proved invaluable in gaining local cooperation. Operation Mountain Shield. Assets successfully infiltrated Taliban planning cell, providing early warning of coordinated attack on forward operating base Chapman. Intelligence prevented estimated 40 to 60 American casualties. Operation Golden Eagle. Assets, identification of weapons, smuggling network, led to arrests of key figures in terrorist financing operation. Investigation resulted in seizure of $2.3 million in assets and disruption of funding for planned attacks on civilian targets. The dry official language fails to capture the reality of what those missions required. The personal risks Sarah took. The psychological toll of maintaining cover identities while surrounded by people who would kill her if they discovered her true allegiance. The physical dangers she faced in some of the world's most unstable regions. Marcus sees his wife as a compassionate nonprofit worker who sometimes travels for conferences. He has no idea she once spent 2 weeks embedded with a group planning attacks on American forces, feeding intelligence to me while maintaining a cover story that required her to express anti-American sentiments, so convincing that I occasionally wondered if she was having second thoughts about her loyalties. The internal debate about revealing these secrets has consumed me for 3 days. Every instinct developed over decades of intelligence work argues against disclosure. Operational security exists for good reasons. Sarah's safety could be compromised if her true identity becomes known. Our former missions could be jeopardized if details of her involvement become public. But those same professional instincts tell me that the current situation is unsustainable. My son's disrespect isn't just personally hurtfully strategically dangerous. His dismissive attitude toward military service, his ignorance about the sacrifices made to protect his comfortable lifestyle, his casual cruelty toward the father who helped ensure his freedom to build a successful legal career, all indicate a fundamental misunderstanding of how the world actually works. More concerning is Sarah's apparent willingness to enable his ignorance by maintaining her cover so completely that she can't defend the truth when it matters. She's become complicit in the very attitudes that make her original sacrifice meaningful. If the people we protected don't understand or appreciate what was done on their behalf, then what was the point of the protection? I've considered alternative approaches. I could arrange for Marcus to learn about my military accomplishments through third parties, perhaps former colleagues who could share stories that would change his perspective without compromising classified information. I could find ways to demonstrate my continued value and capability without revealing Sarah's identity. But those approaches feel inadequate to the scope of the problem. Marcus doesn't just misunderstand his father, he's built his entire worldview on assumptions that are fundamentally wrong. He believes success comes from avoiding difficulty rather than overcoming it. That valuable contributions are measured by social status rather than actual impact. That respect should be based on conventional achievements rather than character and sacrifice. These beliefs make him vulnerable to manipulation by people who understand how the world really works. His ignorance about his wife's true background means he's blind to threats and opportunities that could affect their future. His dismissive attitude toward military service suggests he's unprepared for a world where such service remains necessary for maintaining the freedoms he takes for granted. The decision to reveal Sarah's identity isn't just about defending my reputation or asserting my worth as a father. It's about giving my son access to truth that could protect him and his family. Knowledge that could help him understand the complexity of the world he lives in. Information that might save his life someday. Sarah herself might benefit from the disclosure. Living a complete lie, even a well-intentioned one, takes a psychological toll that accumulates over time. The stress of maintaining perfect operational security in civilian relationships, the isolation of never being able to share her real experiences or true accomplishments, the burden of watching ignorant people make uninformed decisions about issues she understands better than almost anyone. These pressures could eventually compromise her ability to function effectively in either identity. Timing feels right as well. Sarah's civilian identity is now well established and widely accepted. Her marriage to Marcus is strong enough to survive the revelation that her background is more complicated than he originally understood. Her professional reputation is sufficiently developed to withstand scrutiny of her past activities. Most importantly, The current international situation makes her knowledge and experience potentially valuable again. Terrorist threats continue evolving. New conflicts are emerging in regions where she has expertise, and the intelligence community could benefit from reactivating assets with her unique qualifications and proven track record. The mission file contains a phone number for Sarah's original recruiting officer, now a colonel working in strategic planning at the Pentagon. One phone call could reactivate her security clearance, bringing her back into the intelligence community, where her skills and experience would be appreciated rather than hidden. But first, my son needs to understand exactly who he married, what his father actually accomplished during those years of service he's so eager to dismiss. The conversation will be difficult, potentially explosive, certainly life-changing for everyone involved. Yet the alternative, continued silence, while ignorance and disrespect compound, serves no one's interests. The truth has remained classified long enough. The secured storage unit key opens a facility that most people would assume contains old furniture and Christmas decorations. Unit 247 actually houses 27 years of carefully preserved documentation, mission reports, commendation letters, operational summaries, and photographic evidence of activities that shaped global events but never appeared in history books. Gathering the materials I'll need for tomorrow's conversation requires more consideration than simply grabbing files. Each document must serve a specific purpose in the revelation process, building a case that's undeniable without compromising ongoing operations or endangering people who are still active in the intelligence community. Sarah's original recruitment documentation provides the foundation. Her psychological evaluation from 1997 describes a young woman with exceptional analytical capabilities, advanced linguistic skills, and unusual resilience to stress. The assessment notes her strong moral compass combined with pragmatic understanding of operational necessities, clinical language that fails to capture the 19-year-old refugee who'd lost everything but maintained her commitment to preventing others from experiencing similar trauma. The mission summaries tell a story of escalating responsibility and proven competence. Early assignments in Bosnia involved basic intelligence gathering and translation services. Within 2 years, she was conducting independent operations requiring sophisticated cover stories and extended deep cover work. By 2001, she was considered one of the most effective assets in the Balkans theater. Her transition to Middle East operations demonstrates adaptability that impressed even experienced intelligence officers, learning Arabic and Pashto while maintaining operational effectiveness, developing cultural knowledge that helped her blend into societies radically different from her European background, building networks of contacts that provided critical intelligence for years after her initial assignments ended. The commendation letters are particularly powerful because they're signed by senior officers who went on to prominent positions in the intelligence community and Pentagon leadership. Reading recommendations from people who now advise presidents and coordinate international operations, Marcus will understand that his wife's work earned respect at the highest levels of national security apparatus. But the most compelling evidence consists of operational after-action reports that document specific lives saved in attacks prevented through intelligence Sarah provided. Names and locations are redacted for security purposes, but the impact measurements are clear. 47 American military personnel, whose lives were saved by early warning she provided about a planned ambush. 3 terrorist attacks on civilian targets prevented through her identification of planning cells. 1 major weapons trafficking network dismantled based on intelligence she gathered over 18 months of deep cover work. Contact with former colleagues requires delicate navigation of current security protocols. Colonel James Morrison, no relation to Sarah's cover name, served as her primary handler during the Afghanistan operations. He's now stationed at the Pentagon, working in strategic intelligence planning, and maintains security clearance that allows him to discuss declassified aspects of historical operations. Our phone conversation yesterday evening was carefully coded to avoid triggering electronic surveillance systems, while conveying the essential information he needs to provide appropriate guidance. Jim, I'm dealing with a family situation that involves historical operational security concerns. Nothing current, nothing that compromises active missions, but I need to discuss some background with civilian family members who lack proper context for understanding certain relationships. His pause indicated he understood the implications immediately. Stan, that's complicated territory. What's the scope of your disclosure requirements? Limited to 1 asset's background, approximately 6 years of historical operations, all concluded by 2003. The asset is now fully integrated civilian life, married to my son, and the relationship is stable. But family dynamics are creating situations where continued secrecy serves no one's interests. Asset is aware of your intentions. Not yet. But operational discipline suggests she understands the necessity once circumstances are explained. Recommend face-to-face briefing before proceeding. Asset should have input on scope and timing of disclosure. Family integration adds complexity that requires careful management. His advice makes sense from operational and personal perspectives. Sarah deserves advance warning about what I'm planning, opportunity to influence how much information is revealed, and time to prepare for the impact on her. Marriage and civilian identity. Setting up the confrontation requires strategic thinking about location, timing, and participants. Marcus's house provides familiar territory for him, but gives Sarah home field advantage if she decides to oppose the disclosure. My house might feel like ambush terrain from their perspective. Neutral location could seem too formal and raise suspicions before I'm ready to begin the conversation. I decide on my house. Sunday afternoon, invited under the pretense of wanting to apologize for my behavior at the barbecue. Marcus's natural inclination toward magnanimous forgiveness will ensure his attendance. Sarah's curiosity about my motivations will overcome any operational suspicions she might have. The conversation structure needs careful planning to maximize impact while minimizing the risk of complete relationship breakdown. Opening with Sarah's true identity could seem like an attack on their marriage. Beginning with my military accomplishments might sound like self-aggrandizing defensiveness. Better to start with the connection between us, the professional relationship that brought her into my family's orbit, the operational partnership that demonstrates both our capabilities, the mutual respect that justifies disclosure at this moment. Let Marcus understand that his wife and father share a history. Before revealing how extensive and significant that history has been, the supporting documentation is organized chronologically, building from Sarah's recruitment through her most significant operational successes to her transition into civilian life. Each folder contains enough detail to prove the point without overwhelming Marcus with more information than he can process effectively. Physical preparation includes ensuring my home environment supports serious conversation without distractions. Phone unplugged, neighbors informed that I'll be unavailable for several hours. Comfortable seating arranged to facilitate direct eye contact and discourage easy escape. The psychological preparation is more complex. This conversation will change every relationship in my family permanently. Marcus will never see his wife the same way again. Sarah will never be able to maintain complete separation between her identities. I will never again be just the broken soldier who embarrasses his successful son. The outcomes could range from increased mutual respect and stronger family bonds to complete relationship breakdown and permanent estrangement. The risk is enormous, but the alternative, continued silence, while ignorance and disrespect compound, no longer feels acceptable. By tomorrow evening, my son will understand exactly who he married and what his father accomplished during those years of service. He's been so eager to dismiss. Marcus arrives 15 minutes early, which tells me he's genuinely concerned about our relationship and wants to resolve yesterday's conflict. He's wearing the khakis and polo shirt that constitute his weekend uniform, looking like the successful suburban professional he's worked so hard to become. Sarah enters carrying a covered dish homemade cookies, her standard contribution to family gatherings. She's dressed casually, but carefully, the kind of outfit that photographs well for social media posts about family time. Her smile is warm and genuine, but I catch the micro-expressions that indicate heightened awareness. She knows something is different about this invitation. "Dad, I'm glad you called," Marcus says, settling into the leather chair that used to be his favorite spot for homework sessions. "I've been thinking about yesterday, and I owe you an apology. What I said was out of line." His contrition is sincere, which makes what's coming more difficult, but also more necessary. He's apologizing for the delivery of his message, not its content. He still believes his fundamental assessment was accurate, that I'm a damaged veteran struggling to find relevance in civilian life. I appreciate that, son. But before you apologize, I think you should understand what you are actually apologizing for. I've positioned Sarah's original military assignment orders on the coffee table, face down but visible. There are some things about your father and about your wife that you've never known. Sarah's posture shifts almost imperceptibly, The casual relaxation of someone visiting family members transforms into the controlled alertness of an operative who's detected potential threat indicators. She's not sure what's happening, but her instincts are telling her to prepare for operational complications. What do you mean? Marcus asks, glancing between us with the kind of confusion that suggests he's genuinely oblivious to any undercurrents. I mean that your assessment of me as a broken soldier was based on incomplete information, and your understanding of your wife's background has some significant gaps that might change your perspective on both of us. The room becomes very quiet. Sarah's breathing changes in ways that Marcus wouldn't notice, but that I recognize as tactical preparation for unknown scenarios. She's running threat assessments, calculating potential responses, preparing for revelations that could compromise everything she's built over the past 8 years. Marcus, I begin, picking up the assignment orders and turning them face up. What I'm about to tell you is classified information that I'm revealing because your family, and because the current situation requires it. Your wife isn't exactly who you think she is. His immediate reaction is defensive rather than curious. Dad, what are you talking about? If this is some kind of paranoid Sarah, Elizabeth Morrison didn't exist before 2003. I interrupt, holding up the documents. The woman you married was born Selma Kadic, in Bosnia, in 1978. She was recruited by Army Intelligence in 1997 when she was 19 years old. Her cover identity was created as part of her transition to civilian life after 6 years of active intelligence work. The silence that follows feels like the moment between lightning and thunder. Everyone knows something significant has happened, but the full impact hasn't been felt yet. Marcus turns to look at Sarah, seeking immediate denial or explanation. What he sees instead is a woman whose expression has shifted into something he's never witnessed before: professional composure under pressure, the face of someone who's been trained to handle interrogation situations. Sarah, he asks, voice carrying the first hint of uncertainty. She meets his gaze directly, and I watch her make the operational decision that will determine how this conversation proceeds. She could maintain her cover, force me to prove my allegations, try to discredit my claims by suggesting they're symptoms of PTSD-related paranoia. Instead, she chooses truth. Your father is correct, she says simply. My name was Selma Kadic. I was recruited by Army Intelligence in 1997. Sarah Morrison is an identity I adopted when I transitioned to civilian life. The words hit Marcus like physical blows. His face goes through a sequence of expressions: disbelief, confusion, betrayal, anger as he processes information that contradicts everything he thought he knew about the most important person in his life. You're telling me, he says slowly, that my wife is some kind of spy? Sarah corrects. I haven't been active in intelligence operations since 2003, but yes, I worked as an intelligence asset for 6 years before transitioning to civilian life and eventually meeting you. Marcus stands up abruptly, pacing to the window as if physical movement might help him process what he's hearing. This is insane. You're both insane. Sarah, tell him this is some kind of misunderstanding. I slide the mission summaries across the coffee table toward him. These are operational reports documenting some of your wife's assignments. Obviously, sensitive details are redacted, but you can see the scope of her work and the impact it had on American military operations. He returns to pick up the documents, scanning them with the careful attention to detail that makes him an effective attorney. I watch his face. The mission commendation letter is signed by General Patricia Hayes, who went on to become the first woman to serve as Deputy Director of the Defense Intelligence Agency. Her words carry weight that even Marcus can't dismiss. Asset Nightingale's intelligence gathering during Operation Mountain Shield prevented significant American casualties and demonstrated exceptional courage under dangerous circumstances. Recommend highest commendation and continued utilization in high-priority assignments. Marcus reads the letter twice, his legal training helping him pass official language, even as his personal world crumbles around him. Nightingale. My operational codename, Sarah says quietly. Standard security protocol requires that real names never appear in operational documents. He sets down the letter and picks up the next document: an after-action report from Afghanistan detailing how intelligence provided by Asset Nightingale led to the successful interdiction of a planned attack on Forward Operating Base Chapman. The clinical language describes tactical details, casualty estimates, and strategic implications. 47 American lives saved. Marcus reads aloud. Estimated enemy casualties, 12 confirmed, 6 probable. Operation successful due to advanced warning provided by embedded asset. The reality is beginning to penetrate his shock. These aren't vague claims or unverifiable stories. They're official military documents with dates, locations, commanding officers' signatures, and measurable outcomes. His wife, the woman who worries about his eating habits and organizes neighborhood potluck dinners, once provided intelligence that prevented dozens of American soldiers from dying in an enemy ambush. How long have you known? He asks me. And the question reveals that he's starting to understand the deeper implications of this revelation. I recruited her. I answer simply. Captain Stanwick Peterson, Army Intelligence, Bosnia Operations. 1997. Selma was my asset for 6 years. I helped create Sarah Morrison's civilian identity. I've been monitoring her successful integration into American society for the past 8 years. The words hit him like successive punches. Not only is his wife a former intelligence operative, but his father, the man he's dismissed as a broken soldier, was her commanding officer. The professional relationship between us spans decades and involves classified operations that shaped international events. Sarah reaches for one of the commendation letters, holding it like it might contain answers to questions she didn't know she needed to ask. Stan, why now? We agreed that civilian separation was complete. Why are you compromising operational security? Her use of my first name, combined with the professional terminology, gives Marcus another piece of the puzzle. This isn't a recent discovery or sudden revelation. It's the exposure of a long-standing relationship that predates his marriage and continues to the present. Because, I tell her, yesterday my son called me a broken soldier who can't let go of the past. And you smiled sympathetically, instead of telling him the truth about what that broken soldier accomplished, and what his wife contributed to those accomplishments. Marcus turns to Sarah with an expression I've never seen before. On anger, exactly, but something deeper and more complex. You've known my father for years. You've known what he did, what he's capable of, and you let me treat him like an embarrassment. It wasn't that simple, Sarah says, but her voice lacks conviction. Operational security requires operational security. Marcus interrupts. We've been married for 3 years. I've built my life around someone who doesn't exist. Married a woman whose name isn't even real. Trusted someone who's been lying to me since the day we met. The pain in his voice cuts through both Sarah's professional composure and my own satisfaction at finally revealing the truth. This isn't just about correcting his misconceptions or demanding proper respect. It's about the fundamental honesty that relationships require to survive. Sarah sets down the document and looks directly at Marcus. For the first time since my revelation began, my feelings for you are real. My commitment to our marriage is real. The work I do now, the life we've built together, the love I have for you, all of that is absolutely genuine. But it's built on lies, he responds. Your name, your background, your history, your family, everything I thought I knew about you is fiction. Not fiction, I interject. Strategy. Sarah Morrison is who Selma Pike became when she earned the right to choose her own future after 6 years of service that saved American lives. The woman you married is real, she's just more complicated than you understood. Marcus walks to the mantel where his law school graduation photo sits next to my Purple Heart medal. Yesterday, he saw these items as symbols of our different values as academic achievement versus my inability to move beyond military service. Today, they represent different aspects of the same commitment to serving something larger than personal interests. The charity work, he says, still facing away from us. The nonprofit, the kids you help, is any of that real? All of it, Sarah answers immediately. Everything I do now grows from the same motivations that led me to intelligence work originally. I want to protect people who can't protect themselves. Help those who lack advantages I was able to earn. Prevent suffering when prevention is possible. He turns back to face us, and I see my son processing information with the analytical skills that made him successful in law school. So when you said you understood suffering, when you talked about people who've lost everything and had to rebuild their lives, you weren't speaking theoretically. No, Sarah says softly. I was speaking from experience. The refugee camps, the displacement, the process of learning to trust again, after losing everything I know, what those children face, because I faced it myself. Marcus picks up another document, Sarah's original psychological evaluation from 1997, reading the clinical assessment of a traumatized teenager who showed exceptional resilience and analytical capability. He's beginning to understand the woman he married in ways that go far beyond her cover story. This girl, he says, holding up the evaluation. She was 19 years old when Dad recruited her. 19 years old, displaced by ethnic cleansing, fluent in 4 languages, and determined to prevent other people from experiencing what she'd survived. I confirm. She volunteered for assignments that experienced male operatives considered too dangerous. She earned commendations from generals who now advise presidents. The room falls silent as Marcus absorbs the full scope of what he's learning. His wife isn't just more complicated than he realized, she's more accomplished, more courageous, and more valuable than anything he'd imagined possible. Sarah's refugee documentation tells a story that official reports can only hint at. The faded identification card from the Tuzla displacement camp shows a teenage girl with hollow eyes and carefully controlled expression, someone who'd learned to reveal nothing that might be used against her. "This is who I was before your father found me," Sarah says, holding the card so Marcus can see the photograph. Selma Kadek, age 17, displaced person number 4847. No family, no home, no future that I could imagine. Marcus takes the card, studying the image of his wife as a traumatized teenager. The girl in the photograph bears little resemblance to the confident woman he married. But the eyes are unmistakably the same, intelligent, watchful, determined to survive whatever comes next. "My village was called Kravica," Sarah continues, her voice taking on the measured tone of someone who's told this story before, but never to someone it could destroy. "It was small, maybe 800 people, mostly farming families who'd lived there for generations. My father grew wheat and corn. My mother taught at the local school. I had 2 younger brothers who loved football and spent their summers swimming in the river." The present tense shifts to past, as she describes a world that no longer exists. "The attack came at dawn on July 12, 1995. I was sleeping when the artillery started. By the time I understood what was happening, soldiers were in our house." Marcus sets down the refugee card, his face pale as he realizes what kind of story he's about to hear. As a lawyer, he's familiar with human tragedy in abstract terms, briefs, compensation claims, policy discussions, but this is his wife describing the destruction of her childhood. "They separated us by gender and age," Sarah says, looking past us toward a window, but seeing events from decades ago. "Men and boys over 12 went to one area. Women, children, and elderly to another. I never saw my father or brothers again." The clinical precision of her description reveals professional training, the ability to compartmentalize traumatic memories, to present facts without being overwhelmed by emotions. But I can see the cost of that control in the tension around her eyes, the careful regulation of her breathing. "The women and children were loaded onto buses. They told us we were being relocated to safe areas, that families would be reunited once the situation stabilized. I believed him because I was 17 and had never encountered systematic deception on that scale." Marcus starts to speak, then stops, recognizing that interruption would break the flow of a narrative that's clearly difficult for Sarah to maintain. "The bus took us to Potosari, near Srebrenica. Thousands of people, mostly women and children, waiting in a factory compound with no food, limited water, no information about missing family members. We waited for 5 days." She pauses, reaching for water with hands that remain perfectly steady, despite the weight of what she's remembering. On the 5th day, Red Cross representatives arrived. They had lists people who could be relocated, 2 refugee camps in other countries, people who had relatives abroad, who could provide sponsorship, people with special circumstances that qualified them for assistance. "How did you qualify?" Marcus asks quietly. "I didn't," Sarah answers. "But I convinced them I did. I spoke 3 languages, had basic medical training from helping at my mother's school, and demonstrated organizational skills that made me useful in managing other refugees. I lied about my age, claimed to be 19 instead of 17, and fabricated a story about relatives in Germany who were expecting me." The admission reveals another layer of her operational training, the ability to create convincing cover stories under pressure, to identify what authorities want to hear and provide it convincingly. "The refugee camp in Tuzla was supposed to be temporary," she continues. 6 months, maybe a year, until people could return to their homes or find permanent resettlement. I stayed for 2 years, helping other refugees navigate bureaucratic processes, translating for families who spoke only local dialects, organizing educational programs for children who'd missed months or years of schooling. Marcus is beginning to understand how his wife's current work with disadvantaged children connects to her personal history, the non-profit programs she's developed, the educational initiatives she's championed. The fierce advocacy she brings to her charity work, all of it flows from her experience as a displaced person who survived through intelligence, determination, and the kindness of strangers. That's where your father found me, Sarah says, turning to look at me with something that might be gratitude or resignation. Captain Peterson was investigating weapons smuggling networks that used refugee camps as cover for moving illegal materials. He needed someone who could move freely among the displaced populations, who understood the social dynamics, who could gather information without arousing suspicion. And you volunteered, Marcus says. Statement rather than question. I volunteered. Before he finished explaining the risks, Sarah confirms. Not because I was particularly brave, but because I was tired of being helpless. I'd spent 2 years watching terrible things happen to good people while feeling powerless to change anything. Captain Peterson was offering me a chance to do something that mattered. The refugee documentation includes letters from camp administrators, praising Selma Caddick's work with other displaced persons. Reading them, Marcus can see the foundation of skills that would later make her effective in intelligence operations and civilian life: the ability to build trust quickly, to understand complex social dynamics, to organize people around common goals. The transition from Selma to Sarah wasn't just about changing names. She explains it was about learning to trust the future again, to believe that good things could happen to people like me. Your father didn't just give me a new identity, gave me permission to imagine a life beyond survival. Marcus looks between us, his expression shifting from betrayal and confusion toward something that might be understanding. So when you met me, when we started dating, you were already someone Dad knew. You were already part of his life. I was already part of his professional world, Sarah corrects. But meeting you, falling in love with you, building a life together that was entirely separate from any operational considerations. That was Selma choosing to become Sarah completely. The distinction matters more than Marcus might realize. Sarah's relationship with me was professional, based on mutual respect and shared mission objectives. Her relationship with him was personal, growing from genuine attraction and emotional connection that had nothing to do with intelligence work. But you never told me any of this, Marcus says. 3 years of marriage, and I never knew who you really were. You knew exactly who I really was, Sarah responds firmly. You knew someone who'd survived terrible things and chose to help other people rather than become bitter. You knew someone who understood loss and chose love anyway. You knew someone who valued loyalty, honesty in relationships, and service to something larger than personal interests. The details of how I became that person were classified, but the person I'd become was completely authentic. The Intelligence Commendation Award sits between us on the coffee table like evidence in a trial that's been building for years. Signed by 3 different commanding officers and endorsed by the Pentagon's Strategic Intelligence Division, it recognizes exceptional performance in multi-theater operations, resulting in significant tactical and strategic advantages for American forces. Marcus stares at the document, then at Sarah, then at me. His face cycles through emotions I've never seen him express: betrayal, admiration, confusion, anger, and something that might be respect. So this whole time, he says, voice tight with controlled fury, you've both been playing some kind of game with me. Dad, you're watching your former asset marry your son and saying nothing. Sarah, you're building a marriage with someone whose father was your commanding officer, and I'm just the idiot who doesn't know he's living in some kind of spy novel. It wasn't a game, I start, but Marcus cuts me off. Don't. He stands up, pacing again, energy radiating from him like heat from a forge. Just don't. 3 years, Sarah, 3 years of marriage, and you never thought to mention that you used to kill people for a living. I never killed anyone for a living, Sarah responds sharply. I gathered intelligence that saved lives. I prevented attacks. I helped stop weapons from reaching terrorist organizations. Same thing, Marcus snaps back. No, I interject. It's not the same thing at all. Your wife served her adopted country with distinction. She volunteered for assignments that kept American soldiers alive. She sacrificed her identity, her safety, and her personal history to protect people who had no idea she existed. Marcus whirls on me. Years of accumulated resentment, finally finding a target. And you knew she was going to meet me, didn't you? You knew she was positioning herself to get close to your family. No, Sarah says before I can answer. He didn't know. Meeting you was coincidental. Falling in love with you was genuine. Marrying you was my choice, not an operational directive. How can I believe anything either of you say? Marcus demands. My whole life is built on lies. My wife isn't who she claims to be. My father isn't the broken-down veteran I thought he was. Nothing is what it seems. The raw pain in his voice cuts through my satisfaction at finally revealing the truth. This isn't just about correcting his misconceptions, it's about the fundamental trust that makes relationships possible. Your father is exactly who you thought he was, Sarah says quietly. He's a man who sacrificed his comfort for his principles, who served his country, even when that service cost him personally, who protected people who couldn't protect themselves. The only difference is that now you know the scope of what he accomplished. And you're exactly who I thought you were too, I add. You're a compassionate woman who helps disadvantaged children, because you understand what it means to need help. You're loyal to people you love, even when that loyalty requires keeping difficult secrets. You're strong enough to survive terrible things, and still choose kindness. Marcus stops pacing, turning to face us both. But everything I thought I knew about myself is wrong. I'm not the successful lawyer who built his life through hard work and intelligence. I'm the privileged son of a war hero who married a former spy, and I was too self-absorbed to realize any of it. The self-awareness in his statement surprises me. Marcus is beginning to understand that this revelation isn't just about our deception, about his own willful blindness to complexity that didn't fit his preferred narrative. Yesterday, he continues, voice dropping to barely above a whisper, I called you a broken soldier who couldn't let go of the past. And you, he looks at Sarah, you smiled and said nothing while I humiliated the man who'd risked his life to save people like you. I couldn't defend him without compromising operational security, Sarah says, but the excuse sounds hollow even to her. Operational security. Marcus's voice rises again. What operation? You've been retired for 8 years. What were you protecting? The question hangs in the air because none of us have a good answer. Sarah's silence yesterday wasn't about protecting classified information. It was about protecting the comfortable fiction we'd all been living. I was protecting the life I'd built, Sarah admits finally. I was protecting you from having to know things that might change how you felt about me. I was protecting myself from having to integrate parts of my identity that I thought were safely buried. And I was protecting you both from a truth I thought you couldn't handle, I add, but watching you dismiss everything I'd worked for, everything I'd accomplished, everything Sarah and I had achieved together, I realized that protection had become enablement. Marcus sits down heavily, suddenly looking older than his 30 years. So what happens now? Do I pretend I never learned any of this? Do I try to forget that my wife used to infiltrate terrorist organizations and my father was some kind of intelligence operative? Now you understand who you married and who raised you, Sarah says. You understand that the world is more complicated than you realized, that the freedom you've enjoyed came at costs you never calculated, that the people in your life have depths you never bothered to explore. Now you decide whether that knowledge makes you proud or embarrassed, I add. Whether learning that your family has served something larger than personal interests inspires you or threatens you. The Intelligence Commendation Award catches afternoon, sunlight streaming through the window, its official seal reflecting light across the ceiling. 27 years of classified service, 6 years of dangerous operations, countless lives saved, and my son's first instinct is to feel betrayed rather than proud. But I can see him processing. His legal training helping him organize new information into coherent patterns. The careful way Sarah analyzes situations before responding. Her uncanny ability to read people's motivations and predict their behavior. Her passionate advocacy for causes that matter, combined with strategic thinking about how to achieve meaningful change. The signs were all there, visible to anyone who looked closely enough to see them. Marcus just never thought to look past the surface of the comfortable life he'd built. The letter from Rashid Ahmad arrives in my mailbox every Christmas. Written in careful English and addressed to Captain Peterson, hero of Afghanistan. Rashid was our interpreter in Kandahar, a young man who risked his life daily to help American forces navigate cultural complexities and communication barriers. This year's letter mentions his daughter's graduation from medical school. The daughter who exists because Sarah's intelligence prevented the attack that would have killed his entire family. Marcus reads the letter twice, his fingers tracing words that represent lives saved by people he dismissed as irrelevant. This man writes to you every year, Rashid, and for other interpreters who worked with our unit, I confirm. They stayed in touch because they understand what Sarah's work meant for their families, their communities, their countries. The intelligence she provided didn't just save American lives, prevented civilian casualties that would have devastated entire villages. Sarah takes the letter from Marcus. reading it with the careful attention of someone who remembers specific operations and their human consequences. Rashid's family lived near the market complex that would have been bombed if we hadn't identified the cell planning the attack. 47 American soldiers, yes, but also approximately 200 Afghan civilians who were shopping that morning. The numbers hit Marcus like a physical blow. This isn't abstract geopolitical strategy. It's specific people who are alive today because his wife gathered intelligence that prevented their deaths. The weapons cache we identified in Helmand province, Sarah continues, contained enough explosives to destroy 3 schools and a medical clinic. The trafficking network we dismantled was planning to use children as suicide bombers. Every operation had cascading effects that saved lives in ways we could measure and ways we couldn't. Marcus picks up another document from my collection of Pentagon analysis of intelligence operations in Afghanistan between 2001 and 2003. Sarah's codename appears 17 times in operational summaries, always associated with successful missions that exceeded their stated objectives. Asset Nightingale's cultural knowledge and linguistic capabilities proved instrumental in developing local partnerships that enhanced operational effectiveness across multiple theater commands. He reads aloud, her identification of key personnel in terrorist financing networks led to the disruption of funding streams, supporting anti-coalition activities throughout the region. The clinical language can't disguise the significance of what he's reading. Sarah wasn't just gathering information, she was shaping strategic outcomes that affected the entire conflict. I don't understand, Marcus says, setting down the Pentagon report. If you were this valuable, this successful, why did you leave? Why transition to civilian life when you were clearly making such an important contribution? Sarah and I exchanged glances. This question touches on classified policy decisions that go beyond individual operational details, budget cuts, and political changes. I answer carefully. The administration wanted to reduce reliance on human intelligence in favor of technological solutions. Long-term embedded assets were considered too expensive and too politically risky. Political risk? Marcus asks. When assets integrate too successfully into target communities, when they develop genuine relationships and cultural understanding, they sometimes begin advocating for more nuanced policy approaches. Sarah explains. Political leadership preferred intelligence gathering that supported predetermined strategies rather than intelligence that might complicate those strategies. The implication is clear, even in sanitized language. Sarah became too effective, too knowledgeable, too sympathetic to the complexities of the situations she was analyzing. Her insights threatened simplified narratives that political leaders needed to maintain public support. So they forced you out because you were too good at your job? Marcus asks. They offered transition packages to assets who'd completed extended tours. I correct. Sarah had earned the right to choose civilian life. The identity documents, educational funding, integration support, those were rewards for exceptional service, not punishments. But you could have continued if you'd wanted to. Sarah nods slowly. I could have requested reassignment to different theaters, continued operations under new cover identities, maintained active status. But I was tired of living in fragments. I wanted to discover who I might become if I could integrate all parts of myself into one authentic identity. Marcus begins pacing again, but this time his movement seems driven by thought rather than agitation. The charity work, the nonprofit programs, the educational initiatives, you're still doing the same kind of work, just through civilian channels. Exactly, Sarah confirms. Instead of preventing terrorist attacks, I'm preventing educational failures that create conditions where extremism can flourish. Instead of gathering intelligence on weapons trafficking, I'm building programs that give children alternatives to crime and violence. The methodology is similar, but the objectives are constructive rather than defensive. The realization is transforming Marcus's understanding of his wife's motivations and capabilities. Her success in civilian life isn't separate from her intelligence background, it's the natural evolution of skills and commitments that made her effective in operational environments. And Dad, Marcus says, turning to me with an expression I haven't seen since his childhood. You've been watching over both of us all these years, making sure Sarah's transition was successful, monitoring threats that might compromise her civilian identity, protecting family members who didn't know they needed protection. The assessment is more accurate than I'd expected him to understand. My role has evolved from intelligence officer to something more complex: mentor, protector, liaison between Sarah's operational past and civilian future. Your father never retired, Sarah adds quietly. He just shifted from active operations to protective oversight. The man you called a broken soldier has been serving his country continuously for 27 years, adapting his service to changing circumstances and new responsibilities. Marcus stops pacing, standing in front of the mantel where his graduation photo sits next to my Purple Heart. Yesterday, these items represented different values and life paths. Today, they represent different expressions of the same fundamental commitment to service and excellence. I've been such an ass, he says, voice heavy with recognition of his own blindness. Everything I thought I understood about strength, about service, about what makes a life meaningful, I had it completely backwards. The admission costs him something, but it also begins healing damage that yesterday's cruelty inflicted on all of us. Sarah's personal letters to me, written during the early years of her civilian transition, reveal a woman struggling to integrate conflicting aspects of her identity while building authentic relationships. Marcus reads through them with the careful attention he usually reserves for legal briefs, but his expression shows something deeper than professional analysis. Dear Stan, he reads from a letter dated 2005. Today I helped a little girl at the community center with her English homework. She reminded me of myself at that age, serious, watchful, carrying responsibilities that seemed too heavy for small shoulders. For the first time since transition, I felt like all my experiences had led me to exactly where I was supposed to be. The letters chronicle Sarah's journey from operational effectiveness to personal fulfillment, documenting challenges that Marcus never suspected she was facing during their courtship and early marriage. This one's from 2008, he says, holding up another letter. Listen to this. Marcus makes me laugh in ways I'd forgotten were possible. He sees me as someone worthy of protection, rather than someone whose job is to provide protection. Sometimes I forget that Sarah Morrison was supposed to be temporary, just a cover identity that would let me disappear into normal life. But with him, being Sarah feels like coming home to who I was always meant to become. The words hit him visibly. Recognition of love that was genuine, even when built on incomplete information. Sarah watches his face as he processes the complexity of emotions she was experiencing: gratitude for safety, fear of discovery, hope for authentic connection, guilt about deception. I never knew you were struggling with anything, Marcus says. To her, you always seemed so confident, so comfortable with yourself and our relationship. That's because I'd learned to compartmentalize, Sarah responds. Intelligence training teaches you to maintain operational effectiveness, regardless of personal complications. I applied those same skills to civilian relationships. But that must have been exhausting, Marcus observes. Constantly monitoring what you could say, what memories you could share, what parts of yourself were safe to reveal. The insight surprises both Sarah and me. Marcus is beginning to understand the psychological cost of maintaining cover identities, the emotional toll of never being completely authentic even with people you love. It was exhausting, Sarah confirms, but it was also necessary. The alternative was losing everything I'd worked to build, disappointing people who'd invested in my success, compromising operations that might still be relevant to current security concerns. Marcus sets down the letters and looks at both of us with an expression that combines regret with newfound respect. I owe you both an apology that goes way beyond what I said yesterday. I've been living in a bubble of privilege, judging people by standards that have nothing to do with actual contribution or character. The admission represents a significant shift in his worldview. Marcus is recognizing that his comfortable life was built on foundations he'd never examined, protected by sacrifices he'd never acknowledged, supported by people whose true contributions he'd never understood. Your success as a lawyer, I tell him, your ability to build a practice based on helping people navigate complex legal challenges, your instinct for protecting clients who can't protect themselves. Those qualities didn't develop in isolation. They grew from values we taught you, examples we provided, principles we demonstrated, even when you didn't realize you were learning them. And your marriage to Sarah, I continue, your recognition of her strength and compassion, your attraction to someone who combines intelligence with genuine care for others, those weren't accidents. You were drawn to qualities that reflected your upbringing, values that felt familiar even when you didn't understand their origins. Sarah reaches for Marcus's hand, a gesture that bridges the gap between her operational past and their civilian future. The woman you married is exactly who you thought she was. She's just more complicated, more experienced, more tested than you realized. Everything you loved about Sarah Morrison is authentic hits, just built on foundations that include Selma Caddick's experiences. Marcus grips a hand, holding on like it might anchor him, while his understanding of reality reorganizes itself around new information. Can you help me understand how to process this? How to rebuild trust when everything I thought I knew was incomplete? The question reveals emotional maturity that gives me hope for their relationship's survival. Instead of demanding simple answers or immediate resolution, Marcus is asking for guidance about navigating complexity. Trust isn't just about knowing all the facts, I tell him. It's about believing that someone's core character remains constant, even when you discover new information about their history. Sarah kept secrets about her background, but she never lied about who she was or what she valued. And you never lied about who you were either, Sarah adds, looking at me. You've been exactly the same person throughout Marcus's life, someone who protects people, serves something larger than personal interests, and sacrifices comfort for principle. The only difference is that now he knows the scope of what those qualities accomplished. Marcus nods slowly, processing guidance that requires him to distinguish between deception and privacy, between lies and incomplete disclosure. So moving forward, how do we handle this? Do I pretend I never learned any of it? Do we tell other people? Do we change how we relate to each other? Moving forward, Sarah says, we integrate this information into our relationship without letting it overwhelm everything else we've built together. You now know more about my background, which means you can understand my motivations and reactions more completely. But the fundamental dynamics between us, love, respect, shared goals, mutual support, those don't change. And you now know more about your father's accomplishments, I add, which means you can appreciate his perspective and experience more fully. But the relationship we rebuild from this point depends on choices we make going forward, not just revelations about the past. The family photo from Marcus's childhood sits on the bookshelf behind him, a reminder of connections that existed before complications arose. In that picture, we're all younger, simpler, unaware of the complex paths our lives would take. But the love visible in that frozen moment remains real, even if our understanding of each other has become more sophisticated. I want to earn back the respect I lost, Marcus says finally. I want to understand who you both really are, what you've accomplished, what you've sacrificed, and I want to figure out how someone like me, someone who's built his life in comfort and safety, can contribute something meaningful to the world you've been protecting. The family photo from Marcus's childhood shows a simpler time, a young father in uniform, a mother who died too early, and two children who believed their dad could solve any problem. Marcus holds this picture while struggling to reconcile the hero he'd forgotten with the broken soldier he'd created in his mind. I remember when this was taken, he says, voice soft with recognition of something lost and found again. You'd just come back from Bosnia. I was 8, and I thought you were the strongest person in the world. The admission carries weight beyond nostalgia. Marcus is acknowledging that his current perspective was shaped by years of accumulated resentment, rather than accurate assessment of who I'd always been. You were the strongest person in my world too, I tell him. You and Lisa both. Every mission, every deployment, every difficult decision, I measured everything against whether it would make the world safer for my children. But I stopped seeing that, Marcus continues, setting down the photograph carefully. Somewhere along the way, I started measuring your worth by civilian standards that had nothing to do with what actually mattered. I became embarrassed by the very things that should have made me proud. Sarah watches this exchange with expressions that shift between relief and concern. The revelation has achieved its primary objective. Marcus now understands who we really are, but the emotional cost for everyone involved remains unclear. The therapy recommendations I keep giving you, Marcus says, turning to me with genuine regret. The suggestions about moving on and finding new purpose. I was treating symptoms of service-related stress as character flaws. You were worried about me, I respond. That concern came from love, even if the understanding was incomplete. But I wasn't just worried, Marcus admits. I was embarrassed. I thought your struggles reflected poorly on our family's success. I wanted you to be different so that I could feel better about my own achievements. The honesty costs him something, but it also begins healing wounds that have festered for years. Marcus is recognizing that his resentment stemmed from selfishness, rather than genuine concern for my well-being. And Sarah, he continues, turning to his wife, I put you in an impossible position. You couldn't defend Dad without compromising your cover, but staying silent meant enabling my ignorance and cruelty. I forced you to choose between operational security and family loyalty. Sarah's relief at his understanding is visible. I've been carrying that conflict for 3 years. Every time you criticized your father, Every time you dismissed his struggles or accomplishments, I wanted to tell you the truth. But I also wanted to protect the life we'd built together. Which brings us to the formal apology I owe both of you, Marcus says, standing and facing us with the kind of composure he usually reserves for closing arguments. Dad, I apologize for dismissing your service, minimizing your accomplishments, and treating your sacrifices as personal failures. I was wrong about your strength, wrong about your contribution, and wrong about what makes a man worthy of respect. The words carry more weight than simple regret. Marcus is acknowledging fundamental errors in judgment that shaped years of our relationship. Sarah, I apologize for creating situations where you had to choose between honesty and safety, for building our marriage on assumptions I never bothered to verify, and for failing to see the strength and complexity that should have been obvious to someone who claims to love you. He pauses, gathering himself for what comes next. And I apologize to both of you for being the kind of person who measured worth by comfort rather than character, who valued appearance over substance, who was more concerned with how your identities reflected on me than with who you actually were. The apology is comprehensive, addressing not just specific incidents, but the underlying attitudes that made those incidents possible. Marcus is taking responsibility for willful blindness that protected his worldview at the cost of relationship. Authenticity. There's something else. He continues, reaching into his briefcase and pulling out a legal document. I've been working on this since our conversation started. It's a pro bono case involving Afghan interpreters who are trying to get their families to safety. The bureaucratic obstacles are enormous, and most lawyers won't touch these cases because they're complex and unprofitable. He hands me the case file, and I see immediately why this work matters to him now. I want to use my legal training to serve the same kinds of people you and Sarah protected through intelligence work. I want my professional success to contribute to something larger than billable hours and client acquisitions. The gesture represents more than career adjustment. It's Marcus choosing to align his work with values that honor rather than ignore our family's service legacy. And Sarah, he says, turning back to his wife, I want to understand your charity work differently. Not just as nice volunteer activities, but as the continuation of a mission that began when you were 19 years old. I want to support your programs with legal expertise, fundraising connections, and whatever resources I can provide. Sarah's response is immediate and emotional. Marcus, you don't have to. Yes, I do. He interrupts gently. Not because I owe you anything, but because I want to be worthy of the family I've been given. I want to contribute something meaningful to the world you've both been protecting. The transformation in Marcus's perspective is remarkable, but, more importantly, it feels genuine. He's not just apologizing for past mistakes, he's committing to future choices that reflect new understanding. The man I was yesterday, he continues, the man who called his father a broken soldier and dismissed his wife's sympathetic smile. That man was built on ignorance and privilege. I don't want to be that person anymore. Standing in my living room, surrounded by evidence of classified accomplishments and personal sacrifices, my son is choosing to become someone I can be proud of, not just because of his professional success or social standing, but because of his willingness to grow beyond comfortable assumptions and embrace complexity that serves something larger than personal interests. The family photo from his childhood no longer represents a simpler time. It represents the foundation that made this moment of recognition and reconciliation possible. The new family portrait sits on my mantle 6 months later, replacing the formal pose from Marcus's law school graduation. This picture was taken at Sarah's charity gala, where Marcus was honored for his pro bono work with refugee families. We're all smiling, genuine smiles, no longer hiding parts of ourselves from each other. Sarah has integrated her two identities in ways that strengthen both her marriage and her mission. She speaks publicly now about her background as a refugee, using her story to advocate for displaced persons without revealing the classified details of her intelligence work. Her nonprofit has expanded to serve 3 additional communities, funded partly by donations from Marcus's legal colleagues who've learned about her personal history. Marcus has thrown himself into immigration law with the same intensity he once applied to corporate cases. His firm now handles more pro bono refugee cases than any practice in Phoenix, and he's become a recognized expert in asylum proceedings for people fleeing conflict zones. The work has given him perspective on global complexity that his comfortable upbringing never provided. More importantly, our relationship has evolved beyond the awkward politeness that characterized our interactions for years. Marcus calls regularly, Not out of obligation, but because he genuinely values my perspective on cases he's handling. He asks about my military experience, seeks advice about navigating bureaucratic obstacles, and includes me in family decisions that benefit from someone who understands how systems actually work. The change in family dynamics extends beyond Marcus and me. Sarah no longer carries the burden of maintaining perfect operational security in civilian relationships. She can be authentically herself, someone whose compassion is informed by experience, whose strength comes from surviving terrible things, whose effectiveness grows from understanding how the world really works. The monthly dinners at their house have become genuine family gatherings, rather than performances of family togetherness. We talk about current events with shared understanding of their complexity, discuss Sarah's charity work with appreciation for its strategic importance, and debate Marcus's cases with recognition of their broader implications. Yesterday's conversation revealed how completely our relationships have been transformed. Sarah was describing a new program that provides legal assistance to refugee families, and Marcus was explaining how his firm could provide pro bono support for the initiative. We could expand this model nationally, Marcus said, his excitement obvious. Partner with refugee resettlement organizations in other cities, train lawyers to handle these cases effectively, create a network that provides consistent support across multiple jurisdictions. The security considerations would be significant, Sarah responded, thinking through operational implications. Some of these families are fleeing situations where they remain targets. We'd need protocols for protecting identities, managing information, ensuring that legal advocacy doesn't compromise client safety. Dad, Marcus turned to me. You understand those kinds of security concerns better than anyone. Could you help us develop protocols that protect vulnerable clients while still providing effective legal representation? The request represents everything I'd hoped for when I decided to reveal our secrets 6 months ago. Marcus now sees my experience as valuable rather than embarrassing. Sarah can apply her background openly rather than hiding it, and I can contribute to meaningful work rather than feeling dismissed and irrelevant. I'd be honored to help, I told them. In fact, I still have contacts in government agencies who might be able to provide additional support for families in particularly dangerous situations. The conversation continued for hours. 3 people planning how to use their combined experience and resources to serve something larger than personal interests. The collaboration felt natural, built on mutual respect and shared commitment rather than obligation or guilt. Looking at our new family portrait, I see people who've learned to integrate complexity rather than hiding from it. Sarah's strength comes partly from surviving trauma and partly from choosing service over bitterness. Marcus's success means more now because it's directed toward helping others rather than just advancing his own career. My own sense of purpose has been renewed through watching my family choose values that honor rather than dismiss the sacrifices that protected their freedom to make those choices. The broken soldier my son dismissed 6 months ago has become a trusted advisor and collaborator. The woman whose true identity remained classified for 8 years is now the family member whose experience and insight we rely on most. The successful lawyer, who once measured worth by social status, has become someone who understands that real achievement comes from service to something larger than personal ambition. We're still the same people we were before the revelation, but we're also more than we were, more honest, more connected, more effective, and more proud of who we've chosen to become. The secrets that once separated us have become the foundation for deeper understanding and stronger relationships. Sometimes the most important battles really are fought at kitchen tables rather than foreign battlefields. And sometimes the greatest victories come from choosing truth over comfort, complexity over simplicity, and love over fear.